Hundreds of thousands of people gathered in the National Mall to cash in on the promise of freedom our founding fathers so eloquently described in the Constitution. It was the largest civil rights rally in history. The March for Jobs and Freedom was the climax of a movement that had been building for 400 years. 100 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, in the midst of Jim Crow and segregation, union leaders, clergy, and civil rights leaders dramatized the status quo in juxtaposition to the rhetoric of the American dream, of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The event is remembered for Dr. Martin Luther King's monumental "I Have a Dream" speech. History has oversimplified the event and the speech. Dr. King's dream was much more than for little black boys and little black girls to play with little white boys and little white girls.
Right.
His dream was to create a beloved community of social justice for all his people. His dream was for America to make good on its promise to all men that they are created equal. 50 years later, it seems that Dr. King's dream has been deferred. Michelle Alexander has outlined the inner workings of a new Jim Crow, the mass incarceration of black youth in our country. Now 70% of the American prison population is black, and most of them are under the age of 30. Black men and children are seen as a menace to society. The Harvard Implicit Association test shows that 70% of all people have a preference for white faces.
Right.
Last year, Trayvon Martin's death, and this year, George Zimmerman's acquittal, had the nation up in arms.
Right.
But who was to care for the 313 other black men
Right.
who were murdered by police officers on state payroll?
Right.
They shot Ramarley Graham in the back 7 times in front of his grandmother
Wow.
because he had a dime bag.
What?
They shot Kamani Gray because he was pulling up his skinny jeans, and an undercover thought he might have a gun. They chased him 7 blocks and gunned him down in his doorway. And those 2 cops are still walking a beat. Today is also the 60-year anniversary of the death of Emmett Till.
No.
So I ask you today, what has changed? Since 1963, there have been many so-called victories for civil rights. But when you see the culture of injustice we live in, again, what do you see that has changed? It seems we've all ignored Dr. King's warnings and fallen victim to the intoxicating opiate of gradualism. We have deferred full payment of the dream in hopes that more black people in positions of power would result in progress. Relative to the goal of progression, this generation has seen minimal change directed at a small group of black men who are able to benefit from the struggles and suffering of all those that came before.
Right.
It is becoming more and more evident that black faces in high places does not mean an end to racism.
Right. Right.
It is time for us to take an honest look at how far we've come since 1963. Since COINTELPRO murdered and divided the civil rights movement that desired to continue in the eternal vigilance Dr. King spoke of. We have been saturated with reformist logic, latent with everything that King's dream was against. We can no longer allow reformists to control our thought process and continue to feed us this opiate of progress. We need to give up our egos and work to realize the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King. The spirit of the civil rights movement is not dead, but has been hidden by a veil of security that is perpetuated by our black politicians. In North Carolina on Moral Mondays now, we see more and more people getting arrested, facing the injustice of immigration reform. We can only hope that on the anniversary of this historic event, we can resurrect the unwavering demand for freedom and justice for all that Dr. King lived and died for. Quote from the end of the speech, he says, "With this faith, we will be able to hew out a mountain of despair, a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of a nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, pray together, struggle together, and go to jail together to stand up for freedom, knowing that one day we'll be free. Amen. That dream was not for us to get elected together.
No.
That dream was not for us to trust a small group of people to act out what we want. That dream was for people to act in civil disobedience of injustice until that injustice was changed.
Right.
And Dr. King never gave up on that.
No.
But all of us here have succumbed at some point to saying, well, voting is enough. Listening is enough. Understanding is enough.
Not true.
No.
So I ask you, just like Langston Hughes did in his poem Harlem, what happens to a dream deferred?
Right.
I think it gets corporatized, homogenized, prophetized, politicized. But as long as we all understand what this dream really is, it cannot die. Amen.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great job. Very good speech. You could.
There is a roof here.
Well,
I want to shock a few people here.
no.
Martin Luther King was a communist.
Whoa.
Yes, I said it. Martin Luther King was a communist. Martin Luther King believed in the principles of anarchy, of self-determination and definition. He was a radical union organizer.
Right.
He was not just a symbol of
That's
a civil
why they
rights
killed him.
movement, but a champion of justice. He once said, if you want to call me extremist, I consider that an honor. Because
Whoa.
Jesus was an extremist.
Right on.
He challenged the Christian clergy in the South that
Yeah.
wanted to see him rot away
Right.
in that Birmingham jail. And yet today, we look at these people as our enemies. We say political parties are our friends.
Huh.
We say we're Democrat, we're Republican. Don't watch Fox News. Don't watch MSNBC. Read. Understand what is going on. Because until that happens, the politicians who came here and thought they wasted their time because they weren't allowed to speak will continue to manipulate you into thinking that this dream has been achieved. And it is time for us to wake up. Stop letting these people put Dr. King's face on their dreams and their success.
Right.
Because I'm telling you, Dr. King's dream has nothing to do with political office.
That's right.
And if you think it does, you need to read what the man wrote.
Right.
You need to understand the dream and not just think about those same two little lines about little black boys and little white girls coming together and playing. Because he said, I don't want my dream to be black people can move from a smaller ghetto to a larger ghetto. And yet we've accepted that. We think that's progress. It's pasted all over Buffalo. We've made progress. Another thing Dr. King said is progress is a precarious position. Because that's when you don't know if you've done something or not. And I'm going to tell everybody here, we haven't done enough.
Amen.
So if you're ready to do something,
That's true.
this city is full of organizations ready to support you, inform you, and organize you. And if they're not enough for you, then organize one yourself.
Yeah.
But that is the spirit of Dr. King. So when you go home today and you watch Barack Obama talk about the progress and the change and the hope and moving forward,
Yeah.
I hope you realize that that is only meant for about 1% of the population of our country. It's not meant for you, and it's not meant for us. And if it ever will be, it is up to us and no one else. Thank you. Is there anybody else here who would like to speak about what this moment means? All right, we'll start with Nate. Sorry, I saw him first.